Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Today it is the last lecture on the physiology of respiration, and in this lecture we are going to study the effects of hypoxia on the body. We will talk about hypercapnia, and we will study important signs of different respiratory diseases, cyanosis, tachypnea and dyspnea. We will talk about respiratory diseases, and in respiratory diseases we are going to talk about asthma, emphysema, pneumonia and tuberculosis. So first we are going to talk about the effects of hypoxia on the body. Hypoxia, we have talked in detail in the previous lecture that it is decreased oxygen supply to the tissues. It can be due to different reasons. There are different causes of hypoxia that we have discussed in detail in the previous lecture. Now, whatever is the cause of hypoxia, it has profound effects on the body. It affects the functioning of each and every cell of the body. Due to decreased oxygen supply to the brain, there is depressed mental activity, drowsiness, disorientation, headache, twitching of muscles, and seizures can also be there. Due to decreased oxygen supply to the muscles, the work capacity of the muscles is decreased and muscles are fatigued. Severe oxygen deficiency, it can cause even the death of the cells throughout the body. So these are different effects of hypoxia on the body. Now we are going to talk about cyanosis. Cyanosis is very important sign of hypoxia. It is defined as the bluish discoloration of the skin and mucous membranes, and it can be seen on the ear lobes, it can be seen on the nose, lips, hands, feet and nails. So these are different parts of the body where you can see the bluish discoloration. It can also be seen in the mucous membranes. Now cyanosis become evident. It appears when there is increased amount of deoxygenated blood in the increased amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the blood, that is the arterial blood, or in the superficial capillary or subcapillary venous plexuses. So this point is very important, that when more deoxygenated hemoglobin is present in the arterial blood or in the superficial capillary plexuses, then cyanosis will appear. And there is a very definite cutoff value for the amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood. So when the amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood, it becomes greater than 5 grams per deciliter, then cyanosis will appear. And remember that this amount, that is 5 grams per deciliter in the arterial blood, it is an absolute amount. It is not a relative amount. It is an absolute amount, and when deoxygenated hemoglobin becomes greater than 5 grams per deciliter, cyanosis will appear. It means that it does not depend upon how much total amount of hemoglobin is present in a person. So it does not depend upon total amount of hemoglobin, so it is not a relative amount. Whatever amount of hemoglobin is present in an adult, in a person, when more than 5 grams per deciliter will be deoxygenated in the arterial blood, cyanosis will appear. Another important point to remember is that it is not the amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the venous blood or in the veins. It is the amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood or in the capillary plexus. Cyanosis is of two types: peripheral cyanosis, which is also known as localized cyanosis or local cyanosis, and the other type is central cyanosis. So two types are there, peripheral and central cyanosis. First we are going to talk about the peripheral cyanosis. Peripheral cyanosis is seen when there is slowing of the blood flow. So the main cause or the main abnormality in case of peripheral cyanosis is sluggishness of the blood flow through some part of the body. So when there is slowing of blood flow through some part of the body, what happens is that the extraction of oxygen by the tissues is increased. There is more extraction of oxygen from the hemoglobin by the tissues when the blood flow is slow. So when there is more extraction of oxygen from the hemoglobin by the tissues, the amount of deoxygenated hemoglobin in the capillaries can become greater than 5 grams per deciliter. And in that situation, when it becomes greater than 5 grams per deciliter, cyanosis will appear. There can be different causes for peripheral cyanosis, which are as follows. Raynaud's disease. Raynaud's disease is a disease in which there is vasoconstriction of the blood vessels in the upper limb. Due to vasoconstriction, there is slowing of the blood flow and cyanosis will appear in the fingers and in the nails. Then exposure to extreme cold can also cause peripheral cyanosis. You have also observed that in winters, when it is severe cold, it causes bluish discoloration of our nails and fingers. So this is what? This is peripheral cyanosis, and this bluish discoloration in severe cold and in winters, it is because this cold causes the vasoconstriction of the blood vessels, and this due to vasoconstriction there is slowing of the blood flow and more extraction of hemoglobin from the blood, more extraction of oxygen from the hemoglobin, resulting in cyanosis. So this is this cyanosis due to exposure to cold. This is not a pathological condition, so this is physiological. Then arterial or venous obstruction can also result in peripheral cyanosis. You must remember that peripheral cyanosis may be localized to one part of the body. It may not involve the entire body. It may be localized to one part of the body, that is, more deoxygenated hemoglobin may be present only in one part of body that is affected. Like if there is arterial or venous obstruction in some part of body, this obstruction will cause slowing of the blood flow and more extraction of oxygen from the hemoglobin, and cyanosis will appear in that part of the body which is distal to the obstruction in case of arterial obstruction. And the last cause of peripheral cyanosis is cardiac failure. So in cardiac failure, there is failure of the pumping action of the heart, so there is decreased cardiac output and there is slowing of the blood flow. So this results in peripheral cyanosis. Cardiac failure is a cause which not only causes the peripheral cyanosis, but it also results in the other type of cyanosis, which is the central cyanosis. Because in cardiac failure, not only there is sluggishness of the blood flow to the in the systemic circulation, but also if there is right heart failure, there will be decreased blood flow to the lungs, slow blood flow to the lungs, which will also affect the oxygenation and can result in central cyanosis as well. Now we will move on to the central cyanosis. Now central cyanosis appears when there is increased concentration of deoxyhemoglobin in the arterial blood. So from here we can differentiate it from peripheral cyanosis. In peripheral cyanosis, the deoxygenated hemoglobin, it is in the capillary plexuses. Otherwise in the blood, hemoglobin is normally oxygenated. But in case of central cyanosis, the oxygenation of hemoglobin is also decreased. So there is more deoxygenated hemoglobin in the arterial blood. So oxygenation of the hemoglobin in the lungs is affected due to different reasons. Now, central cyanosis can be seen in the lips, on the tongue, and in the mucous membrane. So these are the sites of central cyanosis. If cyanosis it appears around the lips, on the tongue, and in the mucous membrane, think about the different causes of central cyanosis. And these areas are not involved in case of peripheral cyanosis. In case of peripheral cyanosis, it is seen in the fingers, nails, it can be seen in the feet, and it can be seen in the earlobes. So these are the sites of peripheral cyanosis, while central cyanosis occurs in the lips, tongue, and the mucous membranes. And different causes of central cyanosis include the hypoxic hypoxia. So all conditions which result in hypoxic hypoxia will result in central cyanosis. And in case of right to left shunt, when there is mixing of the venous blood with the oxygenated blood, this can also result in central cyanosis. And in case of polycythemia vera, cyanosis is central. And I just told you that in cardiac failure there is peripheral as well as there is central cyanosis. So these are different causes of central cyanosis. So here is a slide showing us the cyanosis, both the peripheral and the central one. You can see the bluish discoloration of the lips and the tongue. Here again, and in the nose you can also see. This is the bluish discoloration of the fingers and the nails. So either it can be only localized cyanosis depending upon the cause, or cyanosis can be generalized affecting the entire body depending upon the cause of cyanosis. Although we studied in the beginning that cyanosis is an important sign of hypoxia, but remember that absence of cyanosis does not rule out hypoxia. It means even if a person does not have cyanosis, it does not mean that hypoxia is being ruled out, because there are certain conditions in which the body tissues are suffering from hypoxia, but cyanosis is not evident. There are two important types of hypoxia in which cyanosis is not present. The first one is anemic hypoxia. So anemic hypoxia is not accompanied by cyanosis. In case of anemic hypoxia, cyanosis is not present. Now why it is so? The reason for this is that in case of anemic hypoxia, the cause of hypoxia is decreased amount of hemoglobin in the blood. So the amount of hemoglobin is decreased, but whatever amount of hemoglobin is present in the blood, it is saturated to its maximum extent. So even if it is decreased, but the saturation of hemoglobin, whatever it is present, is normal. And there is not enough hemoglobin in case of anemic hypoxia to become deoxygenated in an amount greater than 5 grams per deciliter. Again, I am repeating that in anemic hypoxia, the cause is decreased amount of hemoglobin in the blood. So when there is decreased amount of hemoglobin in the blood, not enough hemoglobin is there for more than 5 grams of hemoglobin to be deoxygenated. And whatever hemoglobin is present, it is maximally saturated. So in case of anemic hypoxia, cyanosis is not present. The second type of hypoxia in which cyanosis is not present is histotoxic hypoxia. Now in case of histotoxic hypoxia, if you think, you can very easily sort it out that why in case of histotoxic hypoxia cyanosis is not present. The reason behind this is that in case of histotoxic hypoxia, the cause of hypoxia is inability of the tissues to utilize oxygen. So when the tissues are not able to utilize oxygen, the hemoglobin is not deoxygenated. So in case of in case of histotoxic hypoxia and in case of anemic hypoxia, cyanosis is not present even though the body cells are deprived of oxygen. So absence of cyanosis does not rule out hypoxia. Now we are going to talk about dyspnea. Dyspnea is also known as air hunger. In simple words, dyspnea is difficulty in breathing. And when we define it, it is the mental anguish associated with inability to ventilate enough to satisfy the demand for air. इसका मतलब है कि जब बॉडी को अपनी डिमांड के मुताबिक ऑक्सीजन नहीं मिल रही तो उसके साथ जो एक डिस्कम्फर्ट की फीलिंग एसोसिएटेड है ड्यूरिंग ब्रीदिंग, दैट फीलिंग ऑफ डिस्कम्फर्ट ड्यूरिंग ब्रीदिंग, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज dyspnea. Simple words, difficulty in breathing, and by definition it is the mental anguish associated with the inability to ventilate enough to satisfy the demand for air. Under normal circumstances, in a healthy person, the breathing movements, they are not conscious. So we are not aware of our breathing movements. But in the cases, in conditions when there is when the body is not supplied with enough oxygen so that the demands of the body are met with, in that conditions, the breathing, it becomes conscious because it is associated with mental anguish because of hypoxia. So the patient has to make increased breathing efforts because his cells of the body are not being supplied with enough oxygen, and in such a person is said to be suffering from dyspnea. So I'm again repeating it, that dyspnea is difficulty in breathing, and it is seen when there is a decreased supply of oxygen to the tissues. So it is in pathological conditions, and in that situation when there is not enough oxygen to satisfy the demand of the body, breathing, it becomes conscious and patient has to make effort to breathe, and in such a condition the person is said to be suffering from dyspnea. Patients usually describe it as shortness of breath or breathlessness. So in patient language, dyspnea is shortness of breath or breathlessness. Now dyspnea is subjective in nature and it cannot be measured objectively. It means that it is a feeling of the subject, and it is a feature which you cannot measure quantitatively. You can describe it as mild dyspnea, moderate or severe dyspnea. You can grade it, but you cannot measure it quantitatively. So we say it is subjective. It is not a quantitative measure. It is not a quantitative entity. It cannot be measured. It can be described in terms of grades of dyspnea like mild, moderate and severe, but it cannot be measured objectively. Like blood pressure, you can measure it. You can exactly describe that what blood pressure values a subject have. Like 120/80 millimeter of mercury is a normal blood pressure. Or if a person has high blood pressure, like 160/100 millimeter of mercury. But in case of dyspnea, we cannot describe it quantitatively, so we say it has subjective nature. Now, different causes of dyspnea include severe exercise. Now, remember that severe exercise it is a physiological condition, and in this case dyspnea, it is not pathological, it is physiological, and it occurs in severe exercise because of the fact that in severe exercise there is so much increased metabolism in the muscles, in the exercising muscles, so that to supply the required amount of oxygen to the exercising muscles, the respiratory system has to put in great efforts. The respiratory muscles have to contract very forcefully to increase the rate and depth of ventilation. And when there is an increased effort put in by the respiratory muscles, so it becomes effortful breathing. So it might be associated with the feeling of dyspnea, but this is physiological. Then one person going to the high altitude may have the shortness of breath, because at high altitude there is decreased partial pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere. So decreased partial pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere will result in hypoxic hypoxia, and subject will have a feeling of dyspnea. But again, remember that if we go to the high altitude, again in a normal person, the body will respond to decreased oxygen in the atmosphere, and body can compensate for it in normal person. So person may have dyspnea at high altitude, but body has compensatory responses to decreased oxygen at the high altitude that we are going to study in detail in our subsequent lectures. Then dyspnea is associated with different respiratory diseases like asthma, pulmonary edema, and other respiratory diseases resulting in hypoxia and in cardiac failure. So these are different causes of dyspnea. The last cause is neurogenic dyspnea or the emotional dyspnea. Now in case of neurogenic dyspnea or emotional dyspnea, it is due to abnormal state of the mind. In this situation, there is no pathology in the respiratory system, but dyspnea is because of abnormal state of the mind, so that's why it is called as neurogenic or emotional dyspnea. In emotional dyspnea, this is a feeling of dyspnea associated with certain emotional situations. So neurogenic and emotional dyspnea is because of the altered state of the mind, and there is no underlying pathology in the respiratory system. So these are different causes of dyspnea. Now we are going to talk about the hypercapnia. Hyper mean more, increased, and capnia is for carbon dioxide. So when there is increased or excess carbon dioxide in the body fluids and in the blood, this condition is known as hypercapnia. So I am repeating again that hypercapnia is excess carbon dioxide in the body fluids, in the body tissues, and in the blood. Now there are different conditions which can be associated with hypercapnia. Increased carbon dioxide production can lead to hypercapnia. So one of the cause for hypercapnia is increased production of carbon dioxide. Increased production of carbon dioxide can result in hypercapnia, and the two important causes are there. One is severe exercise and second is fever. So in both of these conditions, the metabolic activity of the body is increased. Increased metabolism in the body cells, it results in increased production of carbon dioxide, and it may produce hypercapnia. Or hypercapnia can also occur when there is hypoventilation. Now in this situation, the production of carbon dioxide in the body cells is normal, but it is accumulated in the body. So normally produced carbon dioxide is produced in normal amounts, but it cannot be exhaled out of the lungs. So hypercapnia will result. When there is hypoventilation, then hypoxia is associated with hypercapnia. You might remember that when we talked about the hypoxic hypoxia, there in one of the cause that we discussed for the hypoxic hypoxia was hypoventilation, and there I have told you that hypoventilation is a condition in which hypoxia and hypercapnia both are present. Hypoventilation means decreased ventilation of the lung. It can be due to decreased activity of the respiratory center. Respiratory center is depressed because of narcotics, drugs, or it can be because of use of anesthetic drugs. So hypoventilation will result not only in hypoxia but also hypercapnia. So these are different causes of hypercapnia. Now we are going to talk about tachypnea. Tachy means more, apnea means breathing. So increased rate of ventilation, increased respiratory rate is known as tachypnea. Normal respiratory rate, the range is 12 to 20 breaths per minute, and with average value of 15 breaths per minute. So if respiratory rate is increased, this is known as tachypnea. Like you may have experienced that when you have fever, the respiratory rate is increased. So there are different causes. One is fever, tachypnea is there. Then in pneumonia, which is a bacterial infection, there is tachypnea. So that is the respiratory rate is increased. Increased rate of ventilation is known as tachypnea. There is another term that we have used frequently during our discussions on different topics, that is hyperventilation. You must be able to differentiate between hyperventilation and tachypnea. Tachypnea is just an increased rate of breathing, while hyperventilation, it is increased rate and depth of respiration. So when both the rate and depth of ventilation is increased, this is called as hyperventilation. And when there is only increase in the rate of breathing, this is known as tachypnea. Now we are going to talk about the respiratory diseases. The first we are going to talk about emphysema. The literal meaning of emphysema is excess air in the lungs. Now both emphysema and asthma that we are going to discuss are included in obstructive lung diseases. Obstructive lung diseases. Emphysema is a disease in which there is obstructive as well as destructive process occurring in the lungs. It can be either due to chronic cigarette smoking, or it can be due to congenital deficiency of alpha-1 antitrypsin. Congenital deficiency of enzyme alpha-1 antitrypsin, it can also result in emphysema. So this is the pathophysiology of emphysema. How does chronic cigarette smoking or the congenital deficiency of alpha-1 antitrypsin results in emphysema, which is obstruction and destruction in the lungs? Chronic smoking, it causes oxidative stress, increased apoptosis of the cells in the lungs. The irritants present in the smoke evoke inflammatory reactions. They cause inflammation and release of the inflammatory mediators. And the toxins and the irritants of the smoke, it also cause imbalance of protease and anti-protease activity. So we have protease enzymes and anti-protease enzymes. Protease enzymes are those which break down the proteins like elastin and collagen present in the lungs. Anti-protease are those which prevent this breakdown of elastin and collagen by elastases and collagenases. So elastases and collagenases are protease enzymes, and in the lungs defensive mechanisms are there which are called as anti-protease mechanisms. So normally there is a balance between the protease and anti-protease activity so that lung tissue is preserved. But due to chronic cigarette smoking, there is imbalance of protease and anti-protease activity. protease activity becomes greater than anti-protease activity. So when there is more protease activity, what will happen? There will be more activation of elastases and collagenases, and this will cause breakdown of the elastin and collagen in the lung. So there will be destructive process, and because of the inflammation there will be obstructive process in the lung. So both obstruction and destruction is there in case of emphysema. If there is congenital deficiency of alpha-1 antitrypsin, again this will result in imbalance of proteases and anti-proteases, and this will result in destruction in the lung tissue, and there will be destruction of the alveolar walls, which will cause a decrease in the surface area of the respiratory membrane, and due to inflammatory reactions and due to release of inflammatory mediators, there will be excess mucus secretion, there will be infection, inflammatory edema of the bronchiolar epithelium, and all these will result in obstruction of the small airways. The walls of the bronchioles, they will be thickened up due to edema, and there will be increased mucus secretion. This will result in narrowing of the lumen of the airways. So this will produce airway obstruction. Now because of airway obstruction, it becomes especially difficult to expire. So when we compare inspiration and expiration, so when there is obstruction of the airways, expiration is more difficult as compared to inspiration. So during expiration there is more difficulty, more resistance in the airways. So this results in entrapment of air in the lungs. Entrapment of air in the lungs because it is difficult to expire. And the net result of all these is a severe, prolonged, devastating air hunger, which can even cause the death of a person, which is really a high penalty to pay for smoking. This is a typing mistake. It is pay, P-A-Y, pay for smoking. So that was about emphysema. Now we are going to talk about asthma. Now asthma is characterized by spastic contraction of the smooth muscles in the walls of bronchioles. The walls of the bronchioles have smooth muscles, and when there is spastic contraction of the smooth muscles, this is a feature of asthma. The asthma is characterized by spastic contraction of smooth muscles in the walls of bronchioles. Now in most of the cases, this spastic contraction of the smooth muscles is because of allergic hypersensitivity. Allergic hypersensitivity of the bronchioles to foreign substances in the air, such as pollen. In a few percentage of the people, asthma may result because of non-allergic irritant present in the air. So in most of the cases, in about 80 to 85% of the cases, asthma is because of allergic hypersensitivity, and in about 15% of the people, especially in old age, it is due to non-allergic irritants present in the air. For example, smog. So smog result in non-allergic type of asthma, and pollens are these result in allergic hypersensitivity. Now in case of allergic reactions, IgE antibodies are involved, and you know from your previous lectures that IgE antibodies, these are attached to the surface of mast cells. When there is exposure to a particular allergen is the antigen, or it's the substance to which the person is sensitive. So when there is exposure to the allergen, this results in antigen antibody reaction or allergen antibody reaction on the surface of mast cell, and this results in mast cell degranulation. Degranulation of the mast cell releases the chemical mediators such as histamine, bradykinin, slow reacting substance of anaphylaxis, eosinophilic chemotactic factor, and bradykinin. So different mediators of inflammation are released because of degranulation of the mast cells. So what will happen as a result? This is the triggering factor, that is an allergen to which the person is sensitive. This will cause antigen or the allergen antibody reaction, resulting in mast cell degranulation. Degranulation will cause the release of chemical mediators, and these chemical mediators will produce airway inflammation. Due to inflammation, what will happen? There will be increased secretion of mucus, hypersecretion of mucus. There will be spastic contraction of the smooth muscles in the walls of the bronchioles, and there will be inflammatory edema of the bronchiolar walls. All these effects together will lead to narrowing of the airways. Air passages will be narrowed, and due to narrowing of the air passages, there will be obstruction, and again obstruction will make it difficult to expire. So expiration becomes more difficult, and this will result in the characteristic features of this obstructive process, which include wheezing, cough, shortness of breath, and tightness in the chest. There will be increased airway resistance because of obstruction, and the lung functions will be affected. Functional residual capacity and residual volume are going to increase in asthma as well as in emphysema because of the entrapment of air in the lungs, because due to obstructive processes in the lungs, it is more difficult to expire. So air is trapped in the lungs, and progressively there is increase in the functional residual capacity and residual volume, and there will be permanent enlargement of the chest cage, resulting in barrel-shaped chest. So this is the diagram showing us the comparison of a normal lung and the asthmatic lung. So this is the lumen of a bronchiole in a normal person, normal amount of mucus. There is relaxed smooth muscles in the walls of the bronchioles, and while in case of asthma, there is allergic hypersensitivity causing inflammation. So there is thickening of the wall of the airways. You can see thickened walls of the airway because of inflammatory edema. You can see excess mucus is there, and there is contraction of the smooth muscles in the walls of the airways. All these effects are going to produce obstruction and narrowing of the airways. Now we are going to talk about tuberculosis and pneumonia. Now both tuberculosis and pneumonia are included in restrictive lung diseases. So lung diseases can be of two types: obstructive lung diseases and restrictive lung diseases. In obstructive lung diseases, we talked about asthma and we talked about the emphysema, and in restrictive lung disease, we are going to talk about the tuberculosis and pneumonia. Tuberculosis is a chronic bacterial infection which is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Now due to this bacteria, there is formation of, first there is cavitation, there is formation of pus, and pus filled cavities are formed in the lungs, and later on there is formation of large amount of fibrous tissue replacing the normal lung tissue. So due to formation of fibrous tissue, the functional lung tissue is decreased, and due to fibrosis, it interferes with the compliance of the lung. The elasticity of the lungs is decreased, so this results in restrictive lung diseases. Next is pneumonia. Pneumonia is an acute inflammatory condition in which alveoli are filled with fluid and blood cells. It is an acute inflammatory condition in which the lungs, in which the air sacs or the alveoli are filled with the fluid and the blood cells. And cause of pneumonia, most frequently, it is the pneumococci. So it's a bacterial infection caused by pneumococci. So there is inflammation of the pulmonary membrane. The pulmonary membrane or the respiratory membrane, it becomes porous, and there is accumulation of fluid within the alveoli. It interferes with the gas exchange and decrease gas exchange across the respiratory membrane because there is decreased surface area. This will result in hypoxemia, that is decreased amount of oxygen in the blood, and this hypoxemia will result in hypoxia, that is decreased oxygen supply to the tissues, and there will be hypercapnia, that is accumulation of carbon dioxide in the body fluids and the blood. So later on there will be large areas of the lungs which are consolidated because of exudation of fluid and the cells, and these consolidated areas later on will be replaced by the fibrous tissue. So this was about brief description of pneumonia. That's all. So here we have finished the topic of respiratory physiology. I hope you understand today's lecture, and if you have any query, you can ask me questions. Thank you for the listening.